What's up, guys? Welcome to The Smart Student. My name is Chelsea Seaburn. I'm excited you're here today because we're going to cover in-text citations under APA 7th edition. Before we jump into that, I do have this awesome free PDF download link down in the description, and more specifically, it covers everything that I'm going to go over in this video today regarding in-text citations. So go ahead and download that and let's get into the good stuff. All right, so first things first, what are in-text citations and why do you care about them? Well, you care about them because by not caring about them, you'll miss valuable points on your written assignments. Now, when it comes to what they are, let's zoom out for a second. I want you to think about the purpose of a citation, also known as a reference list entry, when it comes to academic writing in general. So the purpose of a reference is that when you're writing academic papers, you're researching to get the material for those papers. And that research, those are ideas, thoughts, whatever that belong to other people. And so in order to use someone else's idea in your paper, you need to credit the original author. And so that's exactly what a reference does. What a full citation does is it links borrowed information to the person that originally created it. Now, let's zoom back in on an in-text citation. An in-text citation is simply a shortened version of the full citation, of the full reference list entry. So that way, the material in the paper is properly linked to the full reference list entry, which links to the original source. That's not too bad, right? So if the in-text citation is linking to the full reference list entry at the end of your paper, then what exactly do you need to include in the in-text citation? To explain this, we're going to hop into my laptop where we're going to go over the elements of in-text citations. Then we're going to cover the two formatting options, and I have an entire list of the most common, dare I say it, all the scenarios you're going to run into when it comes to in-text citations. Sound like a plan? Let's do this. And hello, welcome to the inside of my laptop. Let's go ahead and continue with what we were just saying. So, all right, we understand that in-text citations are shortened versions of full citations, full reference list entries. Great. What exactly are you supposed to include in an in-text citation? Well, looking at what I've created here for you, these are templates for the reference list entry and then in-text citations. And if you notice, it's color coordinated for my visual learners, for everyone in general, just because I think it makes things easier. So for a full reference list entry, there are 4 elements you always want to look for, and that is author, date, title, source. Now, coming down to the in-text citation, there's only 2 elements that all in-text citations need, and that is the author and the date. And we don't need a parenthesis there. I'm going to fix that real quick. There we go. So as you can see, the author and the date elements that correspond with the full reference list entry is what you need in an in-text citation. Now, if you'll look under that, there is an option for sometimes a third element, and that is a source locator. So this you have to include when you're directly quoting a source. In other words, you're using the material verbatim. You need a source locator so that the reader can go find that quote exactly where you found it. But since we're here, let's go ahead and talk about source locators for just a second. So you know that a source locator simply needs to be something that indicates exactly where you found the information. So here's a list of some of the most common. If it's a book, use the page number. If it's audio related or video related, go ahead and use a timestamp. Let's say it's a PowerPoint presentation. You can use the slide number, and then the web page. This is a really good example because there is no predetermined source locator for every different type of source. You simply need to use something so the reader can go find it. And so why a web page is a good example is that it demonstrates that you have options. So for example, you could use the paragraph number you found the quote in, or you can use a section heading that the quote is located under. I just wanted to point that out because if you're ever stressing about, oh, what source locator should I use? Just bring it back to the bare minimums. If I were looking this up, what would I need in order to do so? Cool? All right, let's pick up where we left off, which is here. So we now know what elements an in-text citation needs to contain and how those elements correspond with their full reference list entries. The next thing I want to talk about are the two formatting options you have for those in-text citations. So they're exactly what they sound like, but number one, you have a parenthetical citation. And what that is when the elements are enclosed in parentheses like you see they are here. Next, you have the option for a narrative citation. And in this formatting option, what that means is that the elements are now incorporated into the narration or the structure of the sentence. As you can see, the author is a part of the sentence as if the rest of the words are. All right, so one more thing I want to do before we go through all the different scenarios, and that is I want to show you examples of these templates with filled in information. So here we are, starting with a reference list entry. I want you to take note of how the template translates into a real example. So using the color coordination, you can see the author, the date, the title, and the source. Now, moving on to the in-text citation, here is what that would look like. We know we need the author in the date. This is what you would include. So it's always going to be the author's last name. You don't need any other initials. And the year of publication. So even though the entire date is available, doesn't matter. For the date element in an in-text citation, you only need the year. And then down below is simply an example of an in-text citation that has the source locator. But now we know what the in-text citations contain, let's take a look at what they would be in a real life example. So this is for paraphrased material, which is going to make up 95% of your written work. So this is the more traditional in-text citation for a parenthetical and a narrative. In the first one, as you can see, the elements are enclosed in parentheses, and they would come after the last sentence of paraphrased material regarding this source. Just as we said with the narrative, the elements are worked into the narration of the sentence. So the last name is worked into the sentence structure, as you can see it is here. Now, finally, I like to point out that the parenthetical and narrative citation formatting patterns, they can be used for a direct quote as well. Sometimes students forget that you can choose either one, but the formatting for the parenthetical and the narrative stays the same. You simply need to follow the formatting standards for a direct quote. When it comes to the parenthetical citation, you can see that the direct quote is enclosed in double quotations, and then the parenthetical citation follows after the second quotation using the source locator, and the period is going to follow outside the second parenthesis. The narrative citation follows the exact same formatting in regards to the direct quote, in that the direct quote is enclosed in the parentheses. Note how the narration, the last name, is incorporated into the sentence just as before, but now the source locator is going to close out the sentence. As you can see it is here, it's enclosed in parentheses with the period following after the second parenthesis. Very good, making sense? All right, we're officially to the last portion of this video, which is a very important part, where we're gonna walk through the most common scenarios regarding the different types of in-text citations, okay? So here is the most common, and that is a reference entry that has one author. So this is your most standard, what we've seen before, where you would include the author's last name followed by the year that's provided. This is your most basic, simple in-text citation formatting. And I did want to show one more example with that source locator. The rest of the examples won't have them. But let's go ahead, let's graduate to two authors. So our full reference list entry, as you can see, we have two authors here. For the in-text citation, you're going to include them with the ampersand signal sign in between the two last names. As you see it is here, the date element remains the same. This is a good example because I do want to point out that for the narrative citation, you're going to use the word "and" instead of the ampersand. And the reason for that is that nowhere in your writing is it acceptable to use an ampersand ampersand sign instead of the word anywhere throughout your document when it comes to APA formatting. So this is why they want you to spell it out here. All right, let's go ahead and move on to 3 or more authors. And so in this example, I think we have way more than 3. But I think this is a great example to demonstrate 3 or more because APA formatting has made this very simple for you guys when it comes to the in-text citation. Basically, anytime there's 3 or more authors, you're going to use the abbreviation et al., which literally means and others, I believe in Latin or something like that, but it's going to be formatted exactly like you see I have here. So you're going to use the first author's last name, followed by et al. And a period because this is an abbreviation. You have your comma and the date element as normal. Do note that et al., there's no capitalization. You want to keep that lowercase so it's not confused with the author's last name. But now let's move on from authors and let's talk about what you need to do if the author element is not a person per se, but a group author. So an organization, a government agency, something in that vein. Basically, what you're going to do is use the organization as the author because looking at the reference list entry, that is the author element. So in this example, that would be the World Health Organization. So coming down here to our in-text citations, that is what we're going to use in the author element place. Now, you're probably noticing that there's a little bit of variation to this example I want to explain. This first one is what you're going to do if you're only using this source one time. So if I'm just using a few sentences that I've paraphrased, I only need to include this right here. That's perfect. But let's say this is an article or a source that I'm going to use a couple times, or perhaps I mention the World Health Organization later on in my document. What APA would like you to do in this case is the first in-text citation, they want you to type out the full naming and then in brackets use the abbreviation so that way the next time you use the citation, you only have to use the abbreviated shortened version. It just makes your paper look a little less cluttered, neater, so they say. And the narrative citation, as you can see, follows the same formatting standards. Nothing really changes there. But now let's move on to scenarios where an element is missing or even a few less common in-text citation examples. So in this first one, what if the author is unknown, meaning there's no person responsible for the work or a group author? Well, it's quite simple. You want to use the shortened title, or quite frankly, you want to use whatever element is first in your reference list entry. So in this case, you can see the title is APA Citation Guidelines. I do want to point out that in the in-text citation, you want to keep the text italicized, so that way it's crystal clear what this is. In other words, that you are indeed using the title element, and that way the reader can easily match it to the reference list entry. So last thing I want to touch on here is that APA does ask that you use a shortened title, but because the title in this example is already pretty short and concise, you're not going to shorten that any further. But sometimes a title can be quite long, and if it is, you kind of want to just bring it in so you get the gist of it and that it's easily accessible to the reader. I will say unknown authors is fairly uncommon. However, what is significantly more common is a no date scenario. So this is when the reference list does not have a date in this particular entry. And so just as we did in the previous example, you're going to use, well, whatever you have in the reference list entry for the date element. In this case, you're going to use the abbreviated ND uncapitalized with periods. But okay, we have 2 examples left, and these are going to be the less common scenarios, but are still important to know how to do. So in this first one, you're citing more than one study at a time. The scenario here is that you've researched a few different articles, 3 in this example, and they all allude to the same information. So you're researching multiple sources to get a feel for one objective, if you will. And you build a paraphrase that's kind of a combination of all three. So naturally, you need to cite all three of those studies after that paraphrase. And this is simple. All you're going to do is include the 3 citations following formatting standards for their reference list entries, and note they're simply separated by semicolons. So after the date element, you have a semicolon followed by the next citation, a semicolon followed by the final citation. And then the narrative citation, note how it follows the same traditional formatting standards for narrative in-text citations, in that the word "and" is spelled out. And last quick note about citing more than one study at once, you're probably not going to need any source locators here, because if you're going to directly quote any one of these sources, you probably want to cite that source on its own. Okay, the last example is what you do if you have 2 different sources, but the elements for the in-text citation are the same. So the case here is when you have the same author, 2 completely different works, but they're published in the same year. So this is, again, uncommon, but a very simple, quick fix. What APA would like you to do is use a lowercase letter in your reference list entries to decipher between the 2. Therefore, that's exactly what you're going to do in your in-text citation after the date element. So as you can see here, we have A for the first one, B for the second one. So in our in-text citation, that's what we're going to use to decipher between the 2 different sources. Like I said, this is definitely not a common scenario, but it does happen in certain areas where you have a heavyweight researcher that contributes a lot of information to a particular field. Woo! We just covered a lot of ground. I had fun though. I hope you had fun too. Don't forget to download the free PDF, by the way, of all APA 7th edition things related that I've made specifically for you guys under my teaching style. Also, the Smart Student now has a live APA Made Easy workshop for those of you that want to work on your APA formatting skills, particularly when it comes to referencing and citing. I know that these are 2 of the most difficult topics when it comes to APA formatting, and so I'm really happy to work alongside you guys in a live formatting where you can ask questions and get answers. So there's a link down in the description for that as well. If not, I've put it up on the screen. Be sure to find a time that works for your schedule, and I will see you guys in the live workshop.